Hi, I'm Mr. Simons, and in this video, I'm going to talk about Australian exports and the impact of COVID-19. Now, COVID-19 has had huge impacts right across the Australian economy, particularly on the domestic part of the economy. So really looking at local businesses, local jobs, incomes, rising unemployment, falling prices in some areas, that kind of thing. But what we also need to think about is that Australia's exports, the goods and services that we sell overseas, is also affected. That there are big changes taking place in the Australian economy as of July 2020 because of the impact COVID-19 is having on some of Australia's major exports. So if we're going to talk about Australia's exports, it's really important to talk about, well, what they are. That would seem like a good starting point. So there's this great publication from the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, and I'll link to that in the description, and that sets out a whole bunch of trends and information about Australia's exports and imports. But if we just think about exports for a second, so that if we look at, say, Australia's top 5 exports, and I'll put this on the screen at the same time, you can see here that the top 3, that's that commodity natural resources type of things. You can see iron ores and concentrate make up 16%, coal about 15%, natural gas about 11%, and then I would encourage you to focus on number 4, education related travel services. You can see that makes up around 8% of Australia's exports. So you might be a bit confused and thinking about how can education be an export because, well, students are coming here. So the way it works is that, yes, foreign students come to Australia to study, but the money is kind of coming from their home country into Australia. We are selling the education service to a foreign resident, and the money for that service is coming from their foreign bank accounts, from the foreign country into Australia. I know it's a little bit tricky because they might have a local bank account, but you're thinking about a foreign resident is buying a service produced by Australia. That's why it's classified as an export. So then we think about COVID-19. If international travel is stopped, borders are closed, there are no flights, and foreign students are elsewhere, they may not be able to come to Australia and actually study. They may not be getting that value of education, so they may stop paying fees. They may not enroll again if they can't get that education experience. Now, it's true a number of universities and schools have gone to remote learning to adjust for this, and a lot of students are continuing with their study, but for some foreign students, this may not be enough and they may not continue. So if we look at these factors, if this reduces the number of foreign students choosing to study in Australia now and into the future, that will then reduce Australia's export income, worsen the balance of goods and services and the current account deficit, and also takes away an injection, a stimulus as part of aggregate demand. So the reason that this is important is that in your responses, in your discussion in economics short answers and extended responses, that you can talk about this as a kind of threat or a risk in terms of Australia's export income. Indeed, in terms of Australia's external stability. That if there are fewer students studying in Australia, that is a reduction in that export income, whether that's in terms of tuition fees or students spending money on rent, food, other services while they are studying, that's all going to reduce Australia's export income. And that in July, a number of universities are having to contemplate job cuts and shrinking their operations because of fewer foreign students. That's happening in the Australian higher education sector and could happen elsewhere as that kind of travel and that movement of people is reduced. Okay, so a different kind of thing to think about, a current trend in terms of the impact of the pandemic on Australia's balance of payments, external stability, export income, aggregate demand. You can see how you can use the example of the pandemic to really explain what is happening to the Australian economy, why it's happening, and why the RBA and the government are putting expansionary stances in monetary policy as well as fiscal policy. Any questions, comments, or concerns, put them in the comments. And as always, thank you very much for watching.